I was barely 2 swallows into my tepid kitchenette coffee when Clarice from Human Resources stuck her platinum-dyed head around the doorframe and asked, "Eliza, do you have a quick moment?" That phrase, a quick moment, is corporate speak for "we're about to flay you alive," and call it professional development. So I trailed her down the corridor, past the very interns I had personally mentored last year, past the data center I single-handedly resurrected during the great outage of 21, and into the sterile conference box where careers went to die. 2 men in suits were already seated. Clarice sat on the edge of the table like a vulture. Vincent from finance was staring intently at the carpet, and I understood, with a sudden, sinking certainty, that something wasn't just wrong. It was about to be excised with cold precision. "Eliza," Clarice began, her tone oozing with manufactured concern, "the company has been undergoing a strategic realignment, and due to organizational restructuring, your position is being phased out." Phased out? Like I'm some obsolete piece of software, I thought, but I just gave a single nod. Understood. Clarice's eyes widened slightly. She was clearly braced for hysterics. Most people bargain, weep, or demand to see their options. Not me. I have occupied a chair in this office for 15 years. I've weathered 6 different CEOs, 4 corporate rebrands, and 2 market downturns. I'd outlasted the break room refrigerator's strange fungal bloom, the 3rd floor's persistent ceiling stain, and Morty from purchasing. I'd built the very vendor onboarding system they still used for all new contractors. I've witnessed my own code get butchered by self-proclaimed innovation gurus in their Vesa sneakers, and clouds of self-importance. But the true gut punch was yet to come. Vincent cleared his throat. "There is one other possibility, if you're open to it. We're establishing a blended role within the facilities team. It's part-time, but it would keep you with the company. The responsibilities would mainly be custodial, supply management, general sanitation." My thoughts came to a screeching halt. For a moment, I was sure I had misheard. "You're offering me a janitor's cart?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Well, Clarice's laugh was a little too shrill. "Not just a cart. It's a transitional placement. We see it as a lateral synergy initiative." I felt something inside me fracture, not with a bang, but with a final quiet click, like a coffin lid shutting. I smiled, a real smile, and it seemed to unnerve them more than shouting ever could. "I appreciate the consideration," I said, getting to my feet, "but I believe I'll pursue synergy elsewhere." And I left. No yelling, no tears, just a quiet, internal implosion. 15 years of dedication classified as operational streamlining and dragged into HR's digital recycle bin. They were no doubt dispatching the email to revoke my system access. Before my elevator even reached the ground floor, I arrived home, towed off my work shoes, and drained the last of a carton of Merlot. My inbox chimed. Junk mail, I assumed. It wasn't. The subject line read, "Still open to consulting?" I looked at it, unblinking. It was from Caspian, an old acquaintance I'd run into at a tech conference in Phoenix years before. He'd spoken of a boutique firm he was involved with that handled strategic asset buyouts, and had asked if I was ever interested in picking up some contract work. I had disregarded it back then, but tonight I clicked the message open. "Before I continue with what transpired, could you do me a quick favor? I'm aiming to reach my first 10,000 subscribers, and I can assure you the stories from here on out get even more interesting. Smash that subscribe button if you're not already on board. Do a gal a favor. It costs nothing and is brimming with corporate justice." Now, where was I? Right. I typed a 3-word reply. "I'm listening." Caspian's email was brief. Just a couple of sentences and an attached digital business card for a company I'd never encountered called Kestrel Acquisitions. "Trust you're doing well, Eliza. Let me know if you might have an appetite for some part-time advisory work. We're performing diligence on a couple of tech firms and could really use an expert who understands what they're actually seeing." That was 4 months ago. I hadn't answered. I was too preoccupied with applying digital duct tape to the legacy systems for the unappreciative suits at Corvidian Dynamics, my former place of employment, and the dumpster fire I'd just escaped. Now, I was sitting in my own living room in sweatpants, the wine finished, my fury simmering just beneath a layer of calm, like lava under a placid crust. I hit reply. Still interested. What's the project? I clicked send without proofreading, without hesitation. The version of me who was offered a cleaning cart was gone. The one now at the keyboard? She was well versed in the art of quiet retribution. 12 hours later, Caspian was on the phone. His voice was as relaxed as I recalled, the kind that conjures an image of a man who likely had a collection of artisanal ice molds, but never used a placemat. "We have a target," he stated. "Ever heard of Ethelred Capital?" I let out a short laugh. Only every time I had to pull an emergency financial report for them. They own Corvidian. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "Wait," he said, his tone shifting. "You were at Corvidian? For 15 years. Hell, we're about to launch due diligence on them. I had no idea. Neither did they." He let out a low chuckle. "Are you interested?" "Absolutely," I said. "Send over the non-disclosure." The document arrived in my inbox 10 minutes later. It was concise, binding, airtight. I scanned it, signed it, and sent it back so quickly I hardly registered the smirk that was spreading across my face. They needed an assessment of vendor risk. I was the vendor system. They needed to know about legal vulnerabilities. I wrote many of the contracts that were currently rotting in their digital graveyard. They needed an expert who knew how to probe a company's deepest structures with a fine-toothed comb to locate the decay. I had designed the damn decay. We convened via OmniView the following day. Their due diligence archive was sparse, far too sparse. A few PDFs, some outdated organizational charts, a list of key clients and system dependencies that looked like it had been put together by someone faking their way through a final job interview. I posed a single question. "Who is your point person for systems architecture?" Caspian arched a brow. "Technically, that would be you, if you accept." I said yes, and in that moment, I wasn't jobless anymore. I was a mole. No ID badge, no cubicle, no branded coffee mug or free lunch Fridays. But I possessed something far more valuable: access, a mission, and a company full of self-satisfied executives who were clueless about who had just entered the game. Now, we need to discuss the provision I embedded in a vendor contract back in 2017, the very one that is about to make someone's mergers and acquisitions team weep. Caspian's team uploaded the documents to a shared repository named Corvidian Due Diligence Phase 1. It was a digital junkyard of incomplete reports, expired security logs, and spreadsheets crafted by individuals who seemed to believe pivot tables were a form of black magic. I clicked open a folder titled IT Infrastructure Summary and audibly snorted. It contained a network diagram that hadn't been touched since before the pandemic. The cloud infrastructure section still made reference to server banks we had taken offline in 2019, and listed under the owners of security protocols was my own name, Eliza M. Calder. Still misspelled, yet still in force. The further I explored, the grimmer it became. The acquirers were completely in the dark about the tangled mess of legacy code they were about to inherit. There was no recent software inventory, no comprehension of the third-party applications, haphazardly patched into their most critical systems. They were even unaware that the primary customer service dashboard was reliant on a deprecated API that had been red-flagged in a security bulletin 18 months prior. Corvidian had declined to pay for the update, instead rerouting server traffic and crossing their fingers. And those contracts? I opened a PDF named Vendor Master Services Agreement 2017, and a cold thrill ran down my arm. Page 4, Section B, Clause 7.3. I had drafted it myself. In fact, I had championed it during a heated debate in the General Counsel's office when some ambitious executive wanted to bypass exclusivity terms to save a few dollars. Upon change of control or asset sale, all vendor exclusivity rights shall be rendered null and void unless a new agreement is negotiated under the original signatory's pricing structure and with mutual consent. In simple terms, if Corvidian was sold, every single one of their key vendor contracts would dissolve into a legal nightmare unless the new owner secured explicit written approval at the original, now ridiculously low prices. I highlighted the text, added a comment, potential deal breaker, critical risk, and opened a fresh glyph grid document to start diagramming. I mapped every system I had ever built, every API integration, every unrecorded failsafe, and every ill-advised shortcut we were pressured into taking whenever an executive demanded agile results without providing a budget. The entire blueprint of Corvidian's digital guts spilled out of me. When I finished, I had created a strategic map so thorough I could almost pinpoint where the structural failure would begin. Payment gateways, fragile, inventory management, unstable, data privacy compliance, a ticking time bomb. I tagged each component with its dependency rating, maintenance backlog, and the date of its last known audit, most of which were never actually finished. And in the bottom right corner, I added a small note. 90% of this infrastructure runs on platforms I personally designed. No recent updates. No true redundancy. If you buy it, you buy its inherent failures. I leaned back, gazing at the monitor, not with satisfaction, not even with resentment, just a peculiar, lucid clarity. It was like finally getting the diagnosis for the illness that nearly destroyed you. I wasn't just documenting a company. I was preparing its autopsy. That evening, a Synapse message popped up from Caspian. Holy hell. This map is dynamite. No, Caspian. It's not dynamite. It's accelerant. 2 days later, driven by a grim fascination, I navigated to Corvidian's internal vendor management portal and nearly spilled my drink. My access was still active. Not full administrative rights, but I had permissions. Enough. Evidently, someone in the IT department had forgotten to deactivate my consultant profile, likely scheduling it for deletion during the next quarterly audit. HR's idea of housekeeping. But at this moment, I was a phantom inside their network. No red flags, no access denied messages, just silent entry into a neglected corner of a company that thought I was long gone. I hadn't hacked or bypassed anything. I used the same login link I had for 3 years, input the same password, and there it was. Eliza M. Calder, Strategic Operations Consultant. My digital nameplate still hanging there like a tag on a forgotten piece of evidence. I clicked Vendor Archives, waited, clicked Master Agreements, waited again, and there it was, a comprehensive vendor list, last modified 6 weeks ago. The PDF loaded with a deliberate slowness, its significance settling on me like a weight. Page after page of agreements, riders, and complex clauses, names I hadn't thought about in years. Third-party data services, customer retention analysts, a scrappy little startup we signed in 2020 that was likely still powered by sheer will and caffeine. And on page 19, there it was, Clause 14b, hidden like an explosive device, beneath layers of legal jargon. In the event of a change in corporate ownership, all client exclusivity and service provisions will be considered null and void unless specifically renegotiated under original signatory terms via a certified continuity agreement. I could still feel the fight it took to get that clause approved. I remembered the legal team telling me it was unenforceable. I remembered proving them wrong, and that clause was still live. Dozens of contracts, entire operational pipelines, all dependent on a single, obscure paragraph that could detonate their value in a sale, because you can't sell something that ceases to legally exist post-acquisition. I downloaded the document, using my still valid credentials, then closed the browser. I logged off, wiped my cache, and cleared the device signature. I wasn't breaking and entering. I was taking stock of the house I built. Back in the OmniView call with Caspian's team, I dropped the file into our encrypted channel with a single accompanying sentence. They can't sell what they can't transfer. The channel was silent for a full minute. Then Caspian tagged it with a high-priority flag and sent it directly to their legal team. I sat in the dim light of my apartment, letting the reality of it sink in. They thought they had erased me. In truth, they had just filed me away and forgotten I still held the master keys. Not bad for a janitor, is it? The coffee shop had the distinct smell of burnt beans and ambition. You know the type. Minimalist furniture, an acoustic version of a punk rock song playing softly, and every table occupied by someone trying to make their messaging app into a career. I was in a corner booth, my laptop open, nursing a $9 beverage that tasted mostly of oat milk and regret. Caspian was opposite me, his fingers flying across his keyboard as if he were disarming a nuclear device. 2 junior associates sat beside us, murmuring over spreadsheets like students cramming for an exam. We were assembling the final report, the one that would land on Corvidian's boardroom table with the force of a wrecking ball. It was airtight, merciless, and a thing of beauty. Then my phone vibrated, a ProLink notification. Leland Vance has shared a post. Leland Vance, Corvidian's CEO, was a walking, talking motivational poster, a man whose primary skill was climbing the corporate ladder and then convincing everyone below that he had personally crafted each rung. I opened the notification out of morbid curiosity, and there it was, a masterpiece of corporate self-delusion. True leadership isn't about being liked. It's about having a clear vision. Difficult choices forge the path to a more agile, resilient future. So proud of the strength our team is demonstrating in this period of evolution. Below it was a picture of him, smiling in front of a glass-walled office, sleeves artfully rolled up, arms folded, looking like a man who was rejected for a stock photo about thoughtful leadership. #vision, #resilience, #corporate evolution. I nearly spit out my overpriced coffee. "Hey, Caspian," I said, angling my laptop towards him. "You see how they're positioning themselves as a lean, efficient machine? Yeah, well, their visionary leader has a documented habit of postponing critical IT security audits to cut quarterly costs. For at least the last 2 years. He also pushed every major software license renewal into the next fiscal year and classified it as emergency capital expenditure." Caspian stared at the screen. "You can prove that. I was the one who wrote the ignored reports." He gestured to one of the analysts. "Document that. Systemic risk. Add a note on deferred audit liabilities." They both began typing with frantic energy. I continued scrolling. Leland's post had garnered over 400 reactions, mostly from industry sycophants and former employees hoping to get noticed. One comment read, "So inspiring." Another, "This is what real leadership looks like." And I just laughed. A quiet, precise, almost clinical laugh, because I knew what they didn't. Leland thought he was navigating the company through a storm. He hadn't yet realized the storm was already inside the ship, wearing an old consultant's badge and smiling like the devil himself. This was no longer just about seeing them fail. It was about surgical precision. Every boastful sentence he posted became another piece of evidence, another data point to be woven into our risk analysis. His ego was our leverage. His vision was their downfall. The blade wasn't just being honed. It was already at the throat. And the most delicious part, he had handed it to me himself. It began with a text from Faye in the compliance department. "You okay?" No explanation. No further message. Just that. As if I'd been in a pile-up on the freeway, not a victim of a balance sheet purge. Next came a message from Corinne in vendor management. "They are losing their minds here." Vance just called a surprise all hands and said something about mitigating unforeseen legal entanglements. Half the office thinks we're being sold. The other half is bracing for another round of layoffs. People are spiraling. Then Leo, the guy I used to complain about the snack machine with, sent a text that made me laugh out loud. "Whatever is going down. It has your brand of controlled chaos written all over it. If you're behind this, just send a period. I didn't reply. I didn't send a period. I didn't confirm what they were desperately trying to ask. Did you do this? Because I hadn't done anything to them. They were simply collateral damage, standing too close to the powder keg when the fuse was finally lit. Later that afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject: Reconnecting from Clarice Holtz. HR. It was like a terrible movie sequel I never wanted. Hi, Eliza. I hope this email finds you well. I'm reaching out to see if you might be interested in returning to Corvidian in a temporary consulting capacity. We are currently reassessing several key systems, and your institutional knowledge would be of immense value to the executive team as we navigate some strategic pivots. Strategic pivots. My God. The jargon was relentless. No sign of an apology. No accountability. Just a pathetic attempt to patch a gaping hole in a ship that was already taking on water. I read the email 3 times. Then I archived it. No answer. No acknowledgement. Just a digital headstone in my inbox labeled HR Desperation Attempt Number 1. I could picture the scene inside those office walls. The furtive whispers by the water cooler. The impromptu closed-door meetings. The anxious managers constantly refreshing the company directory to see which names had vanished. The rumor mill was in overdrive. Some speculated bankruptcy. Others whispered about a regulatory investigation. A handful even floated the idea of corporate espionage, which was amusing. But no one, not a single person, suspected me, because at Corvidian, no one had ever truly seen me. They saw Eliza from operations, the reliable one who fixed every problem, who never complained, who worked through weekends without so much as a sigh. They never bothered to learn the whole system, its weaknesses, its pressure points, its vulnerabilities, the very things I knew like the back of my own hand. They assumed I had made a quiet exit. They had no idea I left fully armed. And now, every paranoid glance, every secretive synapse channel, every panicked summons from the legal department, it was all the work of a ghost they couldn't identify. I wasn't coming back. Not to consult, not to troubleshoot, and certainly not to clean. I was already exactly where I needed to be, and the very foundation they had constructed upon my labor had just begun to splinter. At 9:12 a.m., an email was dispatched. Subject: Corvidian Acquisition, Final Risk Assessment and Critical Flags. It was sent to a select list of legal and executive personnel at Ethelred Capital, and there, on page 17 of the attached PDF, highlighted in red, bolded, and annotated, was the detonator, Clause 14B, Non-Transferable Vendor Exclusivity Provisions, the language I had personally crafted in 2017, now promoted from overlooked legal boilerplate to a financial executioner's axe. I watched the fallout in real time. The impact was palpable, even through the digital silence. At 9:31 a.m., I saw the first message in our private Synapse channel. FYI, Corvidian's General Counsel just demanded a full audit of the report. At 9:42 a.m., an urgent legal summit was added to their internal calendar. There was no subject. By 10:15 a.m., Kestrel's lead partner received an email asking for a direct conversation with someone who had deep knowledge of legacy vendor agreements. Caspian messaged me a single word. Ready? I replied. Yes. An hour later, I was logged into a secure video conference, my hair tied back, wearing my reading glasses, my expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality over the fire of satisfaction within. They had no idea I would be on the call, not until my video feed appeared, muted, in a small square on their screen, labeled simply, Strategic Advisor. The meeting began with the usual pleasantries, hushed tones, everyone acting as if this weren't a high-stakes confrontation. Corvidian's attorneys looked haggard and cornered, their eyes shifting nervously. One of them was the same lawyer who had once confidently told me my clause would never hold up in a real-world scenario. He now looked as if he'd been awake for 72 hours straight. Then, Kestrel's lead counsel calmly guided them through the findings. We have identified a material impediment to asset transferability under the current contractual framework, specifically Clause 14b, present in multiple key vendor agreements, stipulates non-transferability in the event of an ownership change. A lawyer from Corvidian's side cut in. That clause has never been an issue for us. Caspian leaned forward, his voice as smooth and dangerous as black ice. That's because you've never been acquired before. The lawyer advanced to the next slide, which displayed my clause in stark relief, beside a column titled Agreements at Risk, 47. Below it, bullet points read, renegotiation at original contract rates is not feasible. Significant risk of service disruption. High probability of client loss. We are classifying this as a catastrophic blocker. You could practically see them start to sweat. I watched their head of legal lean over to whisper to someone just out of frame. Another executive started typing furiously on his laptop. A woman in the background pulled up a document on a second screen, her eyes widening as she read. They were scrambling for a loophole, a workaround, a way to defuse a bomb that had already gone off. And then, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. Leland Vance's face materialized on the screen. His camera activated, and he stared at the presentation. He stared at the clause. Then his eyes found me. The pause was a thing of beauty. Recognition dawned in his eyes, spreading like a dark stain. His jaw clenched. His voice, when he finally spoke, was strained but steady. "Eliza." I said nothing. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I just held his gaze through the monitor. He looked away, down at the document, read the clause one more time, saw the initials at the bottom of the contract's signature page, EMC. He knew. He knew precisely what I had done, and more importantly, when. And in that instant, he understood. This wasn't due diligence. This was a vivisection. The boardroom was a monument to glass and ego, with a panoramic view of the skyline they no longer commanded. The morning sun slanted across the gleaming table, as if trying to illuminate the guilty parties. I entered with the Kestrel team. Sharp suits, black portfolios, no idle chatter. No one bothered to introduce me. They didn't have to. The atmosphere shifted the moment I crossed the threshold. Leland Vance was already at the table, his suit looking a size too small, a faint sheen on his forehead, betraying the immense pressure he was under. When he saw me, he flinched. His mind visibly struggled for a moment to reconcile my presence with a file he thought had been permanently archived. "Eliza," he managed to say, his voice thin. One of Kestrel's partners spoke before I needed to. "This is Eliza Calder, our strategic consultant. She is here to provide system-level and contractual analysis during this review." Leland gave a slow, deliberate nod, the kind of nod a man gives when his entire career is imploding before him, and the cause of it all is staring back at him. He didn't address me again. Not for a while. But he made an attempt. 2 hours into the meeting, after Kestrel's legal team had methodically dismantled clause after clause, each one chipping away at Corvidian's valuation, Leland requested a recess. "I would like to have a private word with Eliza," he said, his voice quiet, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. Caspian glanced at me. I gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of my head, not out of anger or triumph, just finality. The meeting continued. They struggled to regain some footing, to argue for their company's worth, to minimize the impact of the exclusivity clauses, the software licensing deficiencies, the skipped audits. But for every piece of ground they tried to claim, we simply revealed another fault line beneath it, and I barely had to speak. My silence was more damning than any accusation. By the end of the 4th hour, Corvidian's lawyers looked as if they were ready to resign. Leland had stopped talking altogether. He was just staring at the polished surface of the table, as if hoping a different reality might materialize there. The acquisition wasn't called off, but it was nothing like the triumphant sale they had envisioned. The terms were completely renegotiated. The valuation was slashed. There were no golden parachutes for the executives, no guarantees of continued employment, just the purchase of a stripped-down, humbled asset, shorn of all its previous arrogance. And me, when it was all over, I stood by the window, looking out at the same city skyline I once viewed from the floor they had unceremoniously ejected me from. Not long ago, they had valued my future at $500 and a bucket of cleaning supplies, telling me I could still be a part of the team. Today, they couldn't afford my rate, let alone find the words to speak to me. I didn't make a grand statement. I didn't offer a knowing smirk. I didn't deliver a monologue. I simply collected my belongings, gave a professional nod to the room, and walked out. But in my mind, I wrote one final sentence on the blackboard of this whole sordid, magnificent affair. 3 days ago, my worth to you was $500 and a mop. Today, I'm here to take out the trash, just not in the way you imagined.